Light Talk. Lumen Brothers. Light Talk. Light Talk. Light Talk. Lumen Brothers. Light Talk.
Chag Sameach, everybody. This is Stan in Gainesville, Florida, and you are listening to Light Talk.
Merry Christmas. This is Anne in San Clemente, and I am back on Light Talk.
Yay!
Feliz Navidad. This is Steve in Dallas, Texas, and today on Light Talk, we present our second annual Christmas special.
And Festivus for the rest of us. This is David in beautiful Firenze, Italy. And if you don't already know, you are listening to Light Talk. And we are the Lumen Brothers.
And Sistah.
Sistah!
Indeed.
We are
Yay.
family. Come on, everybody, and see. Or something like that. Hey, welcome everyone to our special Baby, It's Cold Outside, so let's spend Christmas with the Lumen Brothers Light Talk Extravaganza. Do you know that song, Baby, It's Cold Outside?
Yeah.
You know,
One of my
there
favorites.
was a big controversy about that a couple of weeks ago.
On
What was it?
Facebook.
I didn't catch it.
It's a whole big, mishigosh, so we're not going to get into that.
Mishigosh, there's too much Hebrew on it.
Well, we got lots of Hebrew. We're mixed. We're a big family. We are a melting pot. All right.
I guess he was a rabbi after all.
Anyway, this is our Baby, It's Cold Outside, so let's spend Christmas with the Lumen Brothers Light Talk Christmas Extravaganza. And our dear Lumen sister Ann McMills has joined us at Light Talk Central to celebrate any damn commercial holiday you wish to celebrate. Hi, Ann.
Ann, you're in Gainesville? I didn't know that.
No, I'm not.
Light Talk Central is fluid.
I'm in gorgeous Southern California. There's no Baby, It's Cold Outside here.
Let me tell you, it's beautiful here today. It's all the doors and windows are open in our house. It's stunning.
Yeah, it's amazing. But I'm very happy to be on Light Talk. Thanks for inviting me back.
Oh, it's great to have
We
you,
love
Ann.
that.
And let me tell you, it's freezing here in Firenze. So, anyway.
Well, get some hot pizza while you're there.
Pizza.
So, Anne, did Santa leave you any coal in your stockings this year?
How dare you?
You're not that type of girl?
No, I think I got something worse. I got this lousy tech table turkey loaf sitting here.
Oh, it's like 3 weeks old, that turkey
I
loaf.
know, ew. And I'm a vegetarian. Why did I get that?
Well, they do have vegetarian turkey loaves that come
That's
from
true.
vegetarian turkeys.
So it's a tech table tofurkey loaf.
Yeah, it's a loaf. It's a loaf of stuff. Anyway,
Tofurkey
speaking
loaf.
of Santa, Stan, did you notice any disturbance in the glass of half and half and the cookies?
Well, I didn't use the almond milk, but in fact, I did. Lumen Santa actually did climb down my light tube in my living room.
Oh, my.
And he left a message for our Light Talk listeners. Would you like to hear what he said?
Yes, please read it.
Sure, yeah.
All right. Okay. Well, Santa did come to the house of Jews over here, and he said, "Dear Light Talkers, it was great to visit Light Talk Central again, and I'm glad that Stan removed those annoying peacocks that viciously attacked me last year. I normally don't visit Jewish families, but Light Talk's become so popular, I felt that it would be in the best spirit of Christmas to make an appearance. Look, if Don Holder showed up, I figured I should as well. I would have loved to have left some great presents for you all, but unfortunately I had difficulty with my new Tesla sleigh. You see, the darn autonomous driving system kept directing my sleigh to the Faroe Islands, of course, and I had to dump all my presents there. Ooh. So all I had left were a few barrels of margaritas to go. I'll just leave them in Stan's backyard. I saw them this morning, so help yourselves. By the way, Stan, I did not appreciate you addressing your note to me as Dear Satan, but I forgive you since you wisely left those delicious cookies and some of that creamy almond milk without the udders. Too bad I needed to wash them down with that lousy gefilte fish you also left me. Oh, I love gefilte fish. Santa, not so much. So Merry Christmas and all that stuff. Kiss, kiss, Lumen Santa.
Lumen Santa makes his appearance at Light Talk Central. So how's those margaritas to go? Are they still out there?
You have to get over to Light Talk Central Gainesville and drink them with me.
Oh, great. Well, I'm on my way.
I think they're red and green somehow.
Oh, food coloring, probably. Anyway, but when I leave this place, which I'll be in a couple of weeks, I'll come back. Maybe I'll stop by Gainesville and help you with those.
All right.
So
We'd love that. Just route. You're gonna have to just take a parachute on your way over.
Yeah,
You know,
I could do that. So
drop in.
yeah. So Steve, why don't you tell our listeners what we're doing today? Because God knows if we know.
Well, in today's episode, we are going to share with you what we're calling a Christmas disaster story.
This episode is a Christmas disaster.
one in the making. And scattered in along the way, a few interesting facts you might not know about George Balanchine's The Nutcracker.
For example, in George Balanchine's The Nutcracker, there are 6 to 8 nutcrackers standing by backstage in case one gets broken. Who knew? We're also going to tell some Christmas disaster stories of our own. So, David, I'd like you to start us off.
Oh, my God. Christmas is always a disaster for me. Way back, okay, there's one disaster story that really does stick out for it, though. About 30 years ago, I was contacted, believe it or not, by my union, United Scenic Artists, a producer looking to find a lighting designer who is experienced in large-scale musicals and television. Or why they recommended me, I have no idea. By the way, this never happens. The union will never find you jobs. But
right.
in this case, they actually did. I thought I was dreaming. So they put me in touch with this group from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And they were a church. And they were the First Baptist Church of Fort Lauderdale, which is one of these mega churches. And they do a yearly Christmas pageant. And that particular year, they were broadcasting it on PBS. PBS was actually one of the producers. So they needed a lighting designer with some experience in musicals and, So it's a huge church. As a matter of fact, the church itself is really built as a theater. And it holds about 4,200 people. Anyway, I meet with the people. I go down there. And these were the nicest people in the world. They really were. And I made some lifelong friends while I was there because I ended up designing that show for about 5 or 6 years. But at the time, Martin Professional, we all know Martin. We have lots of friends at Martin, right? They were first starting. I think they had just recently opened their office in Fort Lauderdale. And I had this big plot and, I had a bunch of moving lights. I was going to use Verilights and Gary Moss. Do you guys know Gary? He's a great guy, and he used to work for Martin. He may still do. I'm not too sure. But anyway, he came over and he said, we can cut you guys a really good deal on equipment. I mean, we're right here. We're getting a foothold in the United States, and we'd like to be part of this project. So I ended up using their equipment, and we used about 60 PAL 1200s. And back then, that's when the PAL 1200 was really popular.
Wow, that's a lot.
Well, this was a huge stage. It was gigantic. And the way the show was organized is that the first half of the show, the first act, are all big Christmas production numbers. They were performed and directed by the church members. And because they had such a huge congregation, thousands and thousands of people, they had some amazing talent. So they were doing, basically your big production numbers, your Baby It's Cold Outside, 12 Days of Christmas, things like that, but it was about 45 minutes long. And it was, they wanted it flashy. They told me, we want this to look like a Broadway show. So I said, great, I'll do it, no problem, okay? The second part is actually the story of Christ from the prophecies to the ascension. And it's beautifully written, and it's almost like opera. It really was done like an opera. And the music was just stunning. Some of it original, some of it more traditional, like they would do Silent Night, things like that. But they would have the animals come in, they would do all that stuff. It was great. I'll never forget the elephants going between the aisles, right, and freaking the audience out. That was a lot of fun. And of course, Joseph and Mary on donkeys and things like that. We had them all, peacocks. It never stopped. And so anyway, at the highlight of Act 2 was the birth of Jesus. So what would happen is that there's all singing Silent Night, and they all go make their way up onto the stage. With candles, it was beautiful, all this blue light, stars, the whole bit. flying angels. We had flying angels everywhere. And it was Foy came in to do all the flying. It was pretty cool. At the crescendo of Silent Night, Joseph would come out of the manger and hold a newborn baby. This baby had to be maybe 2 weeks old, okay? And would hold him up. And at that moment, I had 60 PAL 1200s sweep in into an iris, a tight iris, and do a sweep in to the baby.
You want to give him a suntan?
Were you hazed? Were you hazed up too?
Oh, was I hazed up, baby? You have no idea what hazed up was. It was a moment from God, and it was a showstopper. And here's the deal, though. Do you
have a picture?
Yes, I have photographs of this. Anyway, so we used to call this the burning baby queue. Because basically, there were so many lumens hitting this poor child, and of course the child is like dying, is like squirming like a dying cockroach, up there. So I said, "Listen, we can't do this. This is dangerous." So they decided. I was more worried about their eyes than the heat. So we put these little baby goggles on them. They were like little baby goggles, and you couldn't see it from that distance because it was just so bright and crazy. But what was so amazing is that because this was a child from an actual congregation member, people from the congregation would time out their sexual activity so that this little boy or girl would be born 2 weeks before the show so they could be the Jesus.
Oh, you're kidding.
Whoa. Interesting.
I guess. So that's motivation. Hey, kid, you want to be on stage?
Stage mom's starting early.
I think I may have sterilized more children than anything else with this burning baby queue. So
pure PAL light, pure Martin light.
I do want to say one thing though, as a little side thing. I met some great people from Martin during this time. And one of my favorite people was George Valdez, who was my programmer. And he was one of the finest programmers, if not the finest programmer I ever worked with. So a shout out to George, shout out to Gary and everyone else at Martin Professional for that time. I was there with my assistant, really associate, Helena Kuka, who was a grad student at SMU. And after about 5 years, it just got too intense. It's literally 3 weeks every single night from 11 o'clock at night to 6 in the morning programming the show. It was a huge show. We had thousands and thousands of cues. And it got too much for me. And I gave it to Helena. And I think Helena has been doing it ever since. So congratulations and a shout out to Helena Kuka for helping me on that. So that's my Christmas story.
Well, there are no burning babies in New York City at George Balanchine's The Nutcracker. However, they have snow. And that snow is made of small pieces of paper treated with a chemical that makes it flame retardant. There are about 50 pounds of it that are enhanced by blue-colored lights in Act 1 and pink-colored lights in Act 2. And now, a Christmas disaster story from Stan.
Well, thank you, Steve. I'm going to buck the trend here because what I have maybe could be considered a disaster story or maybe not. And it's sort of personal. And aren't the holidays really about family and love and coming together and sharing? So I'm going to tell a story about my Aunt Phoebe, who was sort of the reason that I'm in this crazy business. So Phoebe was a very cultured person and really felt that it was important that her nephew got exposed to the best culture in New York City. And she was a seasoned subscriber to the Metropolitan Opera, and she just loved Lincoln Center. And she felt it her obligation to take me to see things that, a kid may or may not appreciate it, but I think she was sort of getting it embedded in my DNA. So every year, whether I wanted to go or not, this is the disaster part, is I was dragged to Lincoln Center from South Brooklyn on the train to meet my aunt at the fountain in the center of Lincoln Center, where she would then take me into the New York State Theater. I think it's still called that. Maybe it changed the name by now. And we would watch George Balanchine's The Nutcracker, the infamous one. Now, sometimes I paid attention and sometimes I was fidgeting. But nevertheless, this Jewish kid got exposed to that wonderful piece of work year after year after year after year. And it made such a difference in my life. And so I can't think about the holidays without thinking about that experience and thinking about her and her desire to expose me to the better things in life. And certainly that was one. Now, I can't tell you too many details because I was somewhere in the ages of between, 6 and 12, right? So it really wasn't the place that I necessarily wanted to be. But now in hindsight, I'm really I get warm inside thinking about that and how that made a difference in my life. I don't think she ever really wanted me to work in this profession because, as we all know, it's not the most highly paid profession. But I think she wanted me to appreciate art and culture. And that's my Christmas story. It's sort of, Hanukkah related, but I'm very grateful for that. And I think about that at the holiday, as we all should think about our families, our children, our aunts and uncles, and then those who we no longer have in the warm glow of Christmas, Hanukkah, and Festivus.
For the rest of us.
For the rest of us.
I'm so happy they didn't take you down to Broadway to one of the porn houses. Because back then they were really big.
Since you raised that, my same Aunt Phoebe, she was pretty liberal, let me say. She was what was called a bingette. So there were these women who were big fans of Rudolph Bing, who was the director of the Metropolitan Opera. And they'd all wear these little pillbox hats and they would go to the opera. But my Aunt Phoebe took me, now get this, since you brought that up, David, when I was about 8 years old, to see in the first week of its performances a little production that was quite the controversy, directed by Gerald Friedman, called Hair. Now,
I love it.
Now, so here I am, a little kid in the first row balcony, because she was a research librarian, Yale trained. She had money, so she'd get those good seats, and we watched the first act. Now, you might remember at the end of the first act of Hair is the nude scene.
Infamous.
Okay, but you might not know what happened, if you didn't see it, what happened on the Broadway production right after the last scene in the first act, which was the nude scene. The fact is, the house lights came up, and there were about a dozen actors costumed in NYPD blue police uniforms, one on a bullhorn, saying, "Everyone, stand by. You're all under arrest for viewing this nude scene." Now, of course, most people, the adults, got that it was a gag, but I was like 7, and I thought, holy crap, my Aunt Phoebe is getting me arrested at 8 years. I really thought I was going to jail. So maybe that was a Christmas. It wasn't Christmas. I can't remember the month, but I'll never forget it as long as I live. It was quite an experience. And so she was definitely a part of my life and one of the reasons I'm in the entertainment business.
Wow. Well, thank God for Aunt Phoebe.
Also, sadly, Gate McDermott passed away today. He was 89. For our listeners who don't know, he was the composer of Hair.
He was and James Rado.
And Ragni. Rado and Ragni.
Ragni. Yeah, it was 3 of them. That's
Rado
right.
And Ragni.
And did you know this? Did you know that production was in such a disarray that they couldn't sort of get it together, that they brought in Gerald Friedman as the show doctor to stitch it together and make it. And he was, and my understanding is he was the first director on Broadway to ever have his name in a box on a program. Like, they framed it out. I remember reading that somewhere. I know every lyric to that show by heart because I wore out the LP twice. Loved the show.
In George Balanchine's Nutcracker, not much has changed since 1954. In fact, the mechanics are the same as in 1954, which means there isn't much automation to the production. The movements, as when the tree grows, are achieved with the efforts of a 40-person crew, 21 carpenters, 13 electricians, and 6 prop managers. For example, the sleigh that carries Marie and the prince at the end of the ballet is operated by 2 groups, one to raise it, which is about 250 pounds with the dancers, and another one to guide it. So everyone, please sit back, have a sip of eggnog, and enjoy A Christmas Disaster Story from Steve.
Well, my Christmas story is entitled One Dead Mouse. Some years ago, I was asked to design a new Nutcracker. The design team spent about 3 months going back and forth on the ideas for the production, and we finally agreed upon a regionally specific design, something the whole city would see, something the whole city would turn out for, and something the whole city would own. Oddly, one area that was difficult to settle were the costumes to be worn in the Mouse War. After much conversation, we decided that the final mouse look would include a beautifully carved mouse head with brown leather mouse ears. Much like a knight's helmet, the headpiece completely covered the head. We even scrimmed and painted the eye openings. The mouse corps de ballet of 9 and 10-year-olds looked pretty good on stage. During the mouse ballet, the mice would move in geometric patterns, much like a marching band, only at the speed of light, dashing in and out of the wings, on diagonals, and a mad dash from upstage to downstage only to cut left or right at the last possible moment at the proscenium line, mere feet from the orchestra pit.
Wow.
Which, of course, was inhabited by an orchestra. Weeks of rehearsal passed. The technicals and dress rehearsals came and went without a stumble. Before we knew opening night had arrived, the mouse war began and wonderfully choreographed chaos filled the stage. The mice were amazing in their precision. Proud parents were beaming. Grandparents were crying with pride and joy. And backstage, the stagehands were slapping the choreographer on the back, saying, "Well done, old man." Which brings me back to the aforementioned dramatic dash downstage. You remember, single file to the pit at light speed, only to turn away from disaster at the last possible moment.
What could go wrong?
On opening night, that cursed night, one little mouse took a few steps too many and flew mid-air, legs churning into the pit and disappeared into the void. A gasp could be heard from the audience, whilst the pit played on. The other mice dashed about the stage unaware of their missing sister. What seemed to be an eternity, but was probably only seconds, ended when we saw a petite mouse hand grasping at the apron, followed by a little mouse foot in pink point shoes. Then, like Lazarus rising from the dead, a full mouse emerged, 2 hands supporting her backside, lifting her gently onto the stage,
Classic.
whilst the pit played on. Safely back on stage, she raised her little mouse helmet to get her bearings, lowered it back in place, and rejoined her mouse sisters to the roar of cheers and applaud from the city, whilst the pit played on that Christmas Eve. And that is my story of one dead mouse.
Wow. I love it. So cute.
Did that really happen?
Absolutely.
Was she okay, though?
Yeah, what you saw, it was almost like something of the dead. It was like a zombie, like this arm just swung up and smacked onto the stage.
Yep.
And then you just saw her, that was her left arm. Then you saw her right leg swing up and get onto the stage. And then I think it was 2 people lifting her back onto stage.
Do you think somebody caught her on the way down?
I think she fell like hell into the pit, crashed into music stands, and landed somewhere in the viola section.
Oh, what a trooper.
I guess it was one of the funniest things I've ever seen. Particularly since it turned out all right and she wasn't hurt.
Right.
I like that it was sort of a disaster, but not so much a disaster.
It's a nice story.
In George Balanchine's The Nutcracker, candy cane's hoop is custom made and produced from a blend of woods, bamboo, and rattan. The pieces are first soaked in water and then shaped into circles. Sometimes they break because they're fragile, so they make about 10 at a time. We always have about 6 for the dancers to choose from. The different dancers choose different hoops depending on the size and weight. Some are a little bigger, some a little smaller, and that's intentional. And now, our final Christmas disaster story from our Lumen sister, Anne.
Well, I don't know if my story is quite as eloquent as Steve's was there, but I think I would title mine A Very White Christmas. And you'll get it more when I tell
Orange
the
County? It must take place in Orange County. That's all I have to think of.
No, this was when I was being an assistant. I can't remember. I think it was an assistant, not an associate, to a popular, very well-known lighting designer doing a white Christmas in a city that I won't name. But we were doing the white Christmas. This was several years ago now. And I was calling follow spots. And so I did my usual, how you call follow spots, and you're working with the people, and, some have strengths and weaknesses, and you work out what the best shots are for who, and, just doing my thing. And there was one follow spot that wasn't as talented as the others, shall I say. Like, it was either kind of too slow or really, really fast, and so I kept working with this person, like, well, you need to move a little faster to keep up with the person, or, oh, you're overstepping, like that kind of thing. And it was frustrating because, of course, my designer was frustrated with the spots, which therefore equals frustrated with me, and I was the one that had to handle it. And the part that was interesting about it was the follow spot was this older gentleman. He was in his 80s for sure. And I thought, oh, how sweet is he? Like he's not quite, on top of it, like, but he's so nice. And, so I was trying to handle the politics of all that. And, I talked to my designer about it, and we just sort of discussed the challenges, and I said, well, let me try working with him a little bit more and stuff. But then it turned out, it came down the pike that he was a Coke addict.
Oh, that's a very white
That's a white
Christmas.
Christmas.
That's the very white Christmas.
At 80.
There's snow everywhere. Snow
At
is
80.
falling.
So
80.
when he was, doing it, he was very fast. And when he was not, he was very slow.
He was very slow.
He was probably 23, just looked 80 from all the drugs he was
Maybe,
doing.
I don't
Yeah,
know.
oh
but-
my God, that's disaster.
Oh, I know. So we had to
Ugh.
broach the subject with the, crew and all that, or the crew head, and they took pity on him though. The Christmas miracle part of the story is they took pity on him and they just swapped him with the Decalec. So
Oh,
I got
perfect.
the Decalec as the new spot, and then he was backstage. So,
So he was
yeah, that's my
backstage on
story.
Coke.
Wow.
That's so nice to leave our children listening to that. That
Yeah,
story,
really.
that story of Christmas,
Yeah.
giving and
White Christmas.
I had two to choose from, and I couldn't decide. And
that's a good one though.
one
I
we
think
went
you chose wisely, Anne. You chose
Thank you.
wisely.
Finally, in George Balanchine's The Nutcracker, Mother Ginger's costume is stored on a pulley because of its size. The tent light skirt is about 9 feet wide and can accommodate 8 dancers.
Wow.
Crazy.
Well, now you know more about George Balanchine's Nutcracker than you ever imagined. And so thank you for all that information. And, we decided, the Lumen Brothers and Sistah, that we were going to leave you with something very special. Actually, the best present we could ever give you is to give you a short show. And you've got a short show today. We're going to come in right at 30 minutes. But actually, something that we really want to do is we want to pay tribute and celebrate you, our listeners, and all our sponsors with a little Christmas song. And we call it the 12 episodes of Light Talk. Ready, brothers and sisters?
Are we sure this is a gift?
Yeah, this may not be something they want.
Well, here it
but we'll
goes.
do it
We're going to do it
anyway.
anyway. I'm going to start it off. And we're just going to do the last verse. On the 12th ep of Light Talk, the brothers gave to me 12 truss monkeys,
11 big fish cakes,
10 inside showers,
9 crippled dragons.
8 total bastards,
7 codes of silence,
6 juice hose juniors,
5 cheeky riggers, 4 masked mutants,
3 bomb wads.
2 backstage Franks,
and a huge margarita to go.
That was awful.
Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah,
It
the
was
Festivus
funny.
for the
Merry
rest of
Christmas,
us.
everybody.
Merry
Great
Christmas.
holidays.
Hey, wait a second.
Thanks
In the
for listening.
background, that Hammond organ solo that tells us that once again you've spent another Christmas morning listening to Light Talk. Be sure to follow us on Facebook and subscribe to our podcast, and that way you will not miss a second of Light Talk fun.
No guarantee is offered that we can sing or that we provide accurate information or statements or opinions on this podcast.
And we're going to fire this law firm because Tungsten is dead. But in case you decide to litigate us, right now we're still retaining Tungsten Phosphor and Filament, and they'll defend us until our retirement funds are depleted.
Light Talk is written and produced by the Lumen Brothers,
And sister.
coming to you from some little town in Italy, Gainesville, San Clemente, and the Lone Star State.
And be sure to tune in next week at our New Year's show when we discuss what is your thought process in choosing color, how to arrange a lighting portfolio, what are the differences between lighting for theater and architecture, that's for you, Stan, negotiating techniques. And finally, Is it a career or passion?
All that and a new sponsor.
Light Talk with the Lumen Brothers is broadcasting questionable Lumen knowledge and humor around the world.
So season's greetings, Happy Kwanzaa, Feliz Navidad,
Feliz Navidad.
Festivus for the rest of us, and a very, very, very Merry Christmas from Light Talk and the Lumen family. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye, everybody. Enjoy.
Light Talk.